How is everybody out there doing tonight? Glad to have you joining me. Let me see if I can go ahead. Yeah, we got to get a little bit of light here. So, yes, thanks again for joining me. Go KerberosNews.com. You can also go to our Patreon KRTD Media. Pay attention to what's going on with those. Everything that is new coming out. Not just my show, but several of the others as well. Modern Monetary Theory. We have Joe Firestone. He comes on, does his show with that. We have several other good presentations and shows related to not only modern monetary theory, dump the incumbents, the Red Berets, Medicare for All, their big push for that. Number of other shows so that you can really start to get to understand not just how I think, but how other people in the anti-incumbent movement think as we move towards a evolution in politics in the United States. Now, today, yes, thank you, Brandy. Appreciate it. Now, there were a couple big things that came up today that I wanted to make sure we got covered real good. And I sent out the broadcast, sent out the blast. Yeah, so we're looking at things like abortion, gender affirming care, and trans rights. Ironically, both of these bills basically had real big impact here in the state of Idaho fairly recently. Even some aspects with regards to parental rights as far as that goes. So there's going to be some interesting discussions along those lines as far as what rights are represented, what rights need to be discussed, what are the limits of those rights, and so on. In addition to that, of course, we got the good old standard Ukraine-Russian-American conflict. We'll get to that a little bit later. And we got some other good things coming up. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump straight into it here, folks. And yes, Dolores. Absolutely, everybody pay attention to what Dolores. Hit the like, subscribe, share. Okay, that helps spread the word. It makes sure that people know that you watch us, that you watch me. And that improves an awful lot of our opportunities for monetization and the ability to continue to provide these services for you. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and start off with this.
I understand that someone who has committed a rape would not be able to sue if an abortion were to take place. Would a family member of said rapist be able to sue? Would they have standing? Down to 21.
Thank you. If it is the parents, siblings, aunts and uncles, grandparents, then yes.
Same question then for incest as well? Down to 21.
Thank you. Yes.
So if I am raped and choose to have an abortion and my rapist has 10 siblings, is there anything to preclude all of them and their spouses from bringing a lawsuit for $20,000 each?
Down to 21.
I'm not sure their spouses are included in that list, but no.
I understand that someone who has...
Okay, now that was Idaho Senate Bill 1309. Okay, this is the copycat bill from Texas, indicating how rather than making rape illegal in the standard sense, they brought back tort claim as an option with regards to who has standing in the termination of a pregnancy. Now, this is problematic for a number of reasons because it does not limit the circumstances under which someone can bring a claim for a early termination of a pregnancy. So we can look at this and it would be, well, did she actually go to a clinic? Or was it a miscarriage? Was the birth actually viable? So a lot of these circumstances where you have an opportunity, because that's what this is. This is an opportunity for theft. It's an opportunity for suit. This is the case for the ambulance chasers. After tort claim took a hit a while back, and there wasn't an awful lot of opportunity for the ambulance chasers to run around pursuing baseless cases for revenue. This law happens to be one of those that brings that back, and we run the risk of running into, of course, a series of rather volatile lawsuits, up to $20,000 apiece for every member of the family that has standing. And now this comes at a time, more than likely when the window for these suits are likely to occur happens to be when a woman is at her most vulnerable with regards to whether or not the pregnancy was or was not viable, or whether or not the circumstances under which the pregnancy occurred were indeed reasonable. This gets particularly problematic for a number of reasons. The reason why is because the family, no, this is just wrong on so many levels. Okay, it's taking advantage of a situation. It's creating difficulties for not just the doctors, the woman in question, family of the support network as well, in addition to involving lawyers in something that is essentially a family matter. The fallout from this, though, is going to be that this case will not be appealed through the Texas appeals court process. Idaho happens to fall under the Ninth Circuit Court, which has a significantly different view of a lot of these issues than the appeals courts associated with Texas. So there's an extremely good chance that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals will go ahead and strike this down, and the state of Idaho will, in order to preserve it, have to appeal to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court will actually have to rule on the Ninth Circuit Court ruling, as opposed to just sort of pawn it off like they did with the Texas appeals court ruling. So this is going to be an interesting one to watch, folks. The reason why is because this one will go all the way to the Supreme Court. It will go through the Ninth Circuit Court, and it will result in a more definitive ruling from the Supreme Court than what we were able to get out of the Texas suit. Now, for an awful lot of states out there, this is a particularly damaging sign because this is only the first of the copycat bills. Okay, the first. There are already copycat bills of the Texas law going out in several other states: Florida, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia. Everywhere where they have a significant base of conservative legislators, and they are already considering pushing this through. Now, again, it's going to be interesting, folks, but this is the year in which all of these legislators want to be able to get up. They want to stand and say they made their stance on the intimidation, discrimination, and attempted control of women in the United States. Hey, pay attention to it, folks. This is a dangerous process we're going down right now. Okay. We are in the late stages of empire. These are laws that do not need to be written. These are laws that do not need to be made. These are laws that are being created solely for the purpose of forced birth situations so that we can create a generation of Americans that is unwanted. Think that through, folks. Think that through. There are people that are willing to accept the consequences of a universal policy of forced birth in the United States in order to create something. I don't know what. An extension to the list of second-class citizens, a generation of unwanted children, more competition for resources that they intend to continue to make scarcer and scarcer. An increased burden on the welfare system of the United States. As a lot of these children find themselves abandoned, part of broken families. There are unintended consequences of this bill. Idaho Senate 1309. The people who passed this legislation are not going to have to deal with the repercussions of this legislation. So, Brandy, yeah, you bring it up. Missouri is even trying to outlaw abortion in ectopic pregnancies. Okay. Now, this is interesting. The reason why is because this ultimately indicates, you know what? I'm going to call it what it is. Brandy, this is a fucking eugenics program. This is a eugenics program. Forced birth, especially when you are dealing with conditions during the birth, such as ectopic pregnancies, that are extremely likely to kill the women involved. Okay, it's a eugenics program. They are killing women simply because if the women can't carry a birth to term, they don't want the woman to be a burden on society. However you want to look at it, that's where we're at. Military recruitment, all-time lows. White babies, white babies, white babies, white babies. Yes, it's all about the white babies. All-time lows. She needs more to feed it. Yeah, here we are. We're looking at the poverty draft. World War III. We're on the verge of it. We'll actually discuss more about that. Yep. And what comes on with that. So let's go ahead. Take a look at what else we got here. That was the recount. So we are going to look at gender affirming care. Okay, now this gender affirming care issue, I'm going to go ahead and pull it up here. Reason why is because KTVB7, that's one of our local channels. Keith Riddler comes out, KTVB, we're talking about House Bill 675, which is the gender affirming anti-trans care bill. And I'm going to go ahead and read the full statement here. The Idaho State Senate Majority Caucus strongly opposes any and all gender reassignment and surgical manipulation of the natural sex of minors. HB 675 undermines parental rights and allows the government to interfere in parents' medical decision-making authority for their children. We believe in parents' rights and that the best decision regarding medical treatment options for the children are made by the parents with the benefit of their physician's advice and expertise. It is against medical advice in Idaho and is contraindicative by the Idaho Medical Association. Among other provisions, HB 675 outlaws gender-affirming surgery for transgender minors, and the IMA has confirmed that this is already outside the generally accepted standard care and is not being done by physicians in Idaho. True. The bill's language in its current form could be interpreted to extend into the realm of medically necessary care for kids that is in no way related to transgender therapy, but serves children with highly specialized medical needs. The bill worked to carve out this area of care. Unfortunately, it falls short by limiting it to verifiable genetic disorders. Since many of these acute medical conditions cannot always be verified as a genetic disorder or done so in a timely manner, the proposal has unintended consequences. Okay. Now, this is particularly interesting on the surface. because the Idaho State Senate basically told the Idaho House that they can go screw themselves, particularly on this issue. Now, this is not unusual. The Senate and the House have an awful lot of tit for tat that goes back and forth. You didn't pass this, so we won't pass that. That's stupid, so we're not going to pass it. Well, you called us stupid, so now we're not going to pass the other thing. This is something that goes back and forth, which is ironic considering one senator, the two congressmen in each of the 35 districts in the state of Idaho, and somehow the Senate and the House are the ones that are at each other's throats, rather than individual caucuses within the separate chambers. Makes me wonder how they were deciding which seats they needed to go after. Amberly, one of the things you brought up here. Okay, 50 years of the fight for abortion's right, collective white fear of being bred out. Oh, collective white fear. With the white fragility. Yeah, okay. This is the United States. In the creation of the United States, we occupied stolen land. Okay? Let's just go ahead and call that what it is. We occupied stolen land. As a result, we also began to accept almost every major diaspora associate, in the last 200 years. Chinese, Japanese, Basque, Nords, the Irish, the Italians. Most of the Europeans had some sort of form. We have significant Ukrainian population, Bosnian, Herzegovinian, literally every single major diaspora in almost forever, man. Almost forever. And we have a somewhat limited collective heritage. Okay, the brief periods of time in which we were looking at things that happened here in the United States where miscegenation, yes, miscegenation, another one of those big ugly words from the day. The idea of interracial marriage, race mixing. Well, truth is you can't really mix races because otherwise you'd end up with people who can't have children. The human race is all one species. We are all perfectly capable of having children with each other as long as we have the appropriate plumbing to make it all work. There is nothing about the color of our skin that makes it easier or harder for us to have children with each other. Brothers and sisters, husbands, wives, parents, children. You look at the heritage of the United States. I mean, come on, folks. We got 24andMe, we got Ancestry.com, we got genealogy, we got all of these things. For $100 these days, you can actually tell where your genetic heritage comes from. You can pinpoint it. Were your ancestors from the Caucasus? Maybe they were Ukrainian. Maybe they were actually Germanic. They have Roman heritage, Greek heritage, British, Irish, Somali, Nepalese. And literally for $100, you can find out exactly what blend of Heinz 57 you are. The vast majority of Americans will never, ever, under any circumstances, meet the original one-drop laws associated with, or for that matter, quantum blood that was associated with the Slave Codes of Virginia of 1705. Okay? We won't. No one in America is that pure in their heritage. And it's really time we stop pretending that we are. Me and mine got nieces, nephews, cousins, even digging back through my own genealogy, my own ancestry.com. I'll never be white enough for some people. I'll always be too white for others. That does not change the fact that I still have rights. That does not change the fact that the other humans on this planet have rights. So when it comes to an awful lot of this with regards to white fright, white fragility, right? DNA test for Mother's Day, half price. I mean, there is no reason to continue on in total ignorance of what your heritage is. You can literally find out about the skeletons in the closet. Are you really your sister's brother? Not actually your sister's son. Yeah, I realize that's not so much a big thing today as it used to be back in the day. But these are things you really need to stop worrying about, folks. Okay? This idea of white fragility, this idea of white fright, the idea that there is some sort of ongoing white genocide. No, it's bogus. It's a fear-driven phobia. And does not do you or your friends or your community any good to continue to persist in the idea that loving someone from a different culture or a different heritage takes away from the nativity of your birth. Your children will always have your heritage in their blood. So let's stop pretending, folks. Let's stop pretending. This idea that forced birth, the idea that we get stuck on this process, creating these situations where, like we said, we got two different issues right here, right now. One is gender affirming care. The idea that these young men and women maybe want to do something different. And in the process of wanting to be or do something different with their aesthetic, with their body, and the way they want to choose to express themselves and their sexuality and their gender. Why do we want to make people have children they don't want to have? Whether that's through forced birth legislation like the anti-abortion bill that we were just talking about, whether that is forced gender identity, because that's really what this anti-trans bill is. It is forced gender identity. We have the ability to accept and be anybody we want to these days. We have the surgical capability. We have the capacity. And in a lot of cases, we've even found that people can transition back. Now we go back, we take a look at an awful lot of the information associated with gender affirmed care, why people transition to, why they transition back, the reasons for it. At the end of the day, it's a personal decision. It's really none of your business. So why are you trying to write laws about it? Randy, we all were. We all were. This is actually an extremely interesting aspect of American mythology. You know, the idea that there was always an Indian in the woodshed. Yeah, I realize that's a particularly racist statement in context of where it originated. This is one of those things, you know, indigenous ancestry. That is one of the nice things about these tests. You know for sure, you know. You know, you can track it back, you know, which indigenous community are you able to trace your DNA from? Which, you know, tribal affiliations, you know, what your actual percentage is, how far back in your ancestry, you know. And for somebody who's relatively adept at understanding, yeah, 0. Oh, and you got the Neanderthal mark, cave woman. There you go, Lana. There you go. Gotta love the DNA. Gotta love what they're able to do with it these days. That's an interesting number, though. That is an interesting number. What is all this? What does it represent? You know, we're all human, folks. We are all human. Portuguese. I'll let you two discuss that a little bit. Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look at the next aspect. If we start taking a look at what goes on with this one, God, gotta love this one, folks. Russia sanctioning Biden, Hillary Clinton, and other top U.S. officials. Okay, now this is part of what we talk about when we're looking at the global tit for tat in relationship to global politics. Now, we, as in NATO, all the NATO countries, and several others actually as well, when we issued sanctions against Russia. Now, of course, the problem with sanctions is when you issue sanctions against things like grain, rice, food products, beef, being able to purchase things that are produced, you know, that are usually part of a standard trade agreement between countries, what you end up doing is either unemploying people in the given country or increasing the cost of their food with regards to, you know, their cost of living. So unless you go in and initiate price controls, ration cards, similar things like that, so that everybody gets what they need in order to survive, food, housing, security. Unless you're running all of those missions at the same time, the people get hurt. Now, one of the things that we've been looking at, actually, they got a list, Amberly. I'm going to go over the list here in a little bit. I don't think Trump is on that list of sanctions yet. However, it is quite possible, considering some of the other names, that he will be. Remains to be seen. But one of the things NATO did is we started seizing assets and bank accounts and property, land. I should say land rather than property. Land owned by Russian oligarchs. Okay. Germany and France have both seized super yachts owned by Russian oligarchs. Certain other assets and reserve currencies held by NATO and allied nations have been frozen. The SWIFT banking system was one of the first things to go, where we basically shut out yeah, well, it's an interesting discussion because I have been routinely called a Putin sympathizer, and I am not. I don't believe his authoritarian technique was something that should have been resulted in. However, I do understand the urgency with which he applied this particular solution because he spent the last 8 years trying to resolve it, and the US and the UN shut him down every time he brought up the issue. Over the last 8 years, we had the ability, we had an incentive, no less, to actually stop this before it ever started. Right? Seriously, it's just you don't belong in the body you were born with, regardless of the reason. Regardless of the reason, one of the things that's real big about trans care, transgender care, as you get into it, is they are very particular about making sure you go through the counseling, going through the therapy, making sure you understand the consequences of your choice. So it's not like these decisions are taken lightly, which is why such a relatively small percentage of those who transition want to transition back. Okay, but as we go ahead and take a look through what's going on here with Russia, go ahead and pan on down. The list includes President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley. We all remember Mark Milley, right? National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, CIA Director William Burns, Press Secretary Jen Psaki, Deputy National Security Advisor Dalip Singh, U.S. Aid Administrator Samantha Power, Deputy Secretary of the Treasury Wally Adamo, U.S. Export-Import Bank President Chair Rita Jo Lewis. In addition to this, you also have Hillary Clinton, President Biden's son Hunter Biden are also on this list. I expect these lists to continue to develop over the next couple of weeks as more and more names become high priority for the type of sanctions that Russia is planning on instituting against U.S. officials. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this aspect is a lot of our issues right now with the concept that there are biolabs, bioresearch facilities within the Ukraine, is that in 2014, okay, in 2014, we were looking at a John Kerry Department of State. Joe Biden was then vice president. 2014, Hunter Biden was accepted to be a member of the board of Burisma. Hunter Biden and John Kerry's son are co-owners of the U.S. Shell Corporation that was responsible for putting those medical bioresearch labs into operation in the Ukraine to make sure that they got their kickback on the $500 million in U.S. aid, which included biological research on viruses, notionally for the intent of developing and creating vaccines. See, foreign policies, our own press corps love, they are absolutely the worst, Amberly, absolutely the worst. They've been drumming, beating the drums of war, saying, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do the other. Putin's evil, Putin's evil, Putin's evil. Completely ignoring The fact that the United States is currently involved in bombing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other nations right now. That the United States has troops in 165 of 190 countries. And the list continues to go on, and we continue to say Russia, Russia, Russia. No, folks. The problem is right now the United States has overextended itself. We have become too used to being a superpower. We have becoming too used to having our unilateral decisions, our unilateral actions, just to be accepted because nobody wanted to stand up to the big bully on the globe. Okay. There are people going to say, well, that's all whataboutism. We need to deal with Russia now. If you're not focused on Russia now, you're not focused on the real problem. Folks, the United States is the real problem. Has been for at least the last 22 years. Ever since we went into Afghanistan, the United States of America has been the problem. No oversight applied to the war on terror. Expansion, projection. U.S. forces, again, in 165 of 190 countries. Okay. We can no longer afford to support the war effort. We are 30 trillion. 30 trillion. That is the deficit right now. And depending on how you look at it, yeah, I know I got an awful lot of followers out there that believe in modern monetary theory. And the fact that modern monetary theory should have been funding the building of the United States. Only it hasn't been. We've been using some form of modern monetary theory to fund the empire, to fund nation building, to fund military adventurism for the purpose of satisfying ego. And here we are on the verge of World War III, attempting to cover up the sins of the Obama administration. Yes, these are the sins of the Obama administration. $500 million a year going into the Ukraine in order to launder money for the Kerrys and the Bidens. Come on, guys. We let John Kerry's son and Hunter Biden create a shell corporation so that we can give them money intended to develop biological research facilities in the Ukraine. So this is one of those things that's extremely interesting about this list that has been created by Putin with regards to U.S. politicians. Okay, he still has names to add to him. He will still be adding names. I strongly suspect that a significant number of individuals from the Obama administration and Trump administration will continue to be added. Correct. That is a thing. Okay. Debt. Debt is different than the deficit. Deficit is representative of how much we overspend our budget. Okay. So we have revenue that comes in that says we bring in 1.2 trillion in revenue a year. The deficit is because we spend 2.2 trillion a year. The difference is the deficit as opposed to the debt, which is the cumulative of what happens when you don't actually manage the deficit spending. But yeah, there's still lots of things that are broken. Regardless of what we decide, what we believe is the best monetary policy moving forward, whether we are looking at modern monetary theory, whether we are looking at maintaining the Federal Reserve or decentralizing, distributing the Federal Reserve into individual banks, whether or not we are looking at a changing currency and running a modern monetary theory concept at the state level using individual state cryptos or some other trusted form of managing the currency. We have an awful lot of things that are associated, different concepts. The Bank of North Dakota, state-based bank. It's doing its own internal loading for the for the state of North Dakota. Continues to see success, continues to see a number of things that are going on with regards to that. So, again, as we start taking a look at the world, is right now because of what's going on with Ukraine, Russia, the fact that we've taken Russia off of the SWIFT, we are already looking at fallout with regards to who trusts which economy better moving forward with regards to who which nation states, other nation states are willing to trade with. We've already heard talk that Saudi Arabia is moving over to the yuan in order to facilitate oil sales to China. And Saudi Arabia has been using the U.S. petrodollar for decades. This is not a good sign. And literally, it is the early stages of the war, because as we start looking at what's going on, sanctions, it's economic warfare. Straight up, we've started the embargo, we've started the siege warfare, and at some point, they're either going to have to capitulate to us in order to break the siege, or they will have to escalate in an attempt to break the siege. Of course, one of the funny things about sanctions is when we sanctioned Russia, we self-sanctioned ourselves from the things that we buy from Russia, and Russia in turn buys from us. This is one of those things that's interesting as we look at, we buy 3% of our oil from Russia. We buy 20% of the nickel that's associated with batteries that's used in our electric cars from Russia. Who really gets hurt with regards to buy an electric car? Moving from gas to electric means that we are dependent upon something that the nation we just sanctioned produces 20% of for the production of what we do already own with regards to our electric cars. This is a dangerous, slippery slope that we continue to see. And Lana, yeah, absolutely right. It's the nepotism. Okay. And we look at it. The Kerrys and Bidens associated with the medical company that oversaw the retrofitting of the previous Warsaw Pact bio research labs under American management. The fact that literally we just gave two, children of key players in the Democratic Party key roles, and we funded them. We gave them money. We gave them enough money so that they could pay themselves to live really well for a very long time. Is one of those things. Solyndra. Solyndra was originally intended to be a big green project. It was essentially awarded, no bid. It happened to go to friends of the family, friends of Congress. Those were the owners in the business that got the no contract bid for the greening of America during Obama's administration. Solyndra had folded because they didn't know what they were doing, nor were they even interested in doing what they said they were going to be doing. It was all money laundering. And we still continue to support that. With the Biden administration, we continue to support that. It's one of the interesting things that we take a look at when we're looking, President Zelensky. go ahead and take a look at what goes on with President Zelensky. Amount Congress spent into existence in a given fiscal year that hasn't been taxed back. Ideally, yes. It's an asset. And the fact that we own the debt, therefore, it is an asset of the American people. But we, as the American people, got to pay back the debt. So it's one of those mixed blessings. It's really sort of depends on how you want to imagine the economics to actually be working. Right, Kay. Biden keeps giving Ukraine more money, but he's cut off the United States. You know, we're still dealing with COVID here. We're still looking at relief, people who need it, working through the process, and we've been cut off. We continue to see ourselves being cut off. So let's. Okay.
Я
Something we want
запитав
to watch here.
сьогодні у 27 лідерів Європи, чи буде Україна в НАТО. Запитав прямо. Всі бояться. Не відповідають. А ми не боїмось. Ми не боїмось нічого. Не боїмось, захищаючи нашу державу. Ми не боїмось Росії. Ми не боїмось говорити з Росією. Ми залишаємось наодинці у захисті нашої держави. Хто готовий воювати разом з нами? Чесно, не бачу таких. Хто готовий дати Україні гарантію
That is not
вступу?
actually the one I wanted. That is embarrassing.
Чесно.
Let's go ahead and see whether or not I can find the recent one. Okay, so one of the things that happened here recently was Ukrainian President Zelensky actually went on TV. He spoke to U.S. Congress today, this morning. And Adam Schiff was one of the interesting ones because Adam Schiff, you know, U.S. nobody, was extremely upset because President Zelensky decided to show up and address the U.S. Congress while wearing a T-shirt. The man's doing a Zoom call from a bunker, and Adam Schiff wants him to wear a T-shirt, or wants him to wear a pressed suit to address U.S. Congress. Never mind the fact, the role that United States Congress had in creating the situation right now that Zelensky is currently in. I won't lie. I do not blame Zelensky one bit for showing up to address Congress on a Zoom call, wearing a T-shirt with a symbol that's usually associated with first responders. You know, Adam, man, come on. We can do better. We can do a lot better, especially when it comes to the fact that we put good Mr. Zelensky in danger. Okay. Let's be real here. I'm going to have a candid conversation here with you. Conversation. We're going to have a conversation here, folks. Okay. The United States of America had the ability to stop this war 8 years ago. We did. We didn't. You know why we didn't? We wanted to make sure that John Kerry's son and Hunter Biden had ownership of a business that was being funded by U.S. dollars in the Ukraine in order to create a sense of urgency in, you know, Putin with regards to the security of his western flank. Wow. the Kerrys and the Bidens continue to get paid buco bucks for letting the CIA run the businesses for them. Okay. We've talked about this, the nepotism that's associated with it. Correct, Lena? Straight up nepotism. We are taking children of politicians with no business experience, putting them in chief executive officer positions, handing them, 7 and 8 figure annual incomes to run businesses in foreign nations that we are funding. This continues to be a significant problem. And you know what I say to that? I got it here. Dump the incumbents, folks. Dump the incumbents. This is one of these things we need to talk more about. Okay. The problem in the Ukraine right now is not nearly as much what the Ukrainians are doing or what the Russians are doing. It was the nepotism that's associated with U.S. actions in the Ukraine. We were willing to pursue the wealth of select U.S. oligarchs at the risk of life and liberty of several individuals. Yeah, life and limb. At the risk of genocide. And that's literally what we have done. We have created the circumstances for a genocide. All for the purpose of making sure that a couple politicians' sons had nice little golden parachutes. Now, I'm pretty sure they legalized these particular kinds of war crimes. They legalized the money laundering. They legalized the money transfer. They legalized the nepotism. They legalized all of the loopholes that allowed them to conduct business in this most shameful and disappointing way. So when you take a look at the history of what our politicians have done to the world for the sake of personal wealth, personal advancement, personal ambitions, we pretty much need to do a clean house, folks. Dump the incumbents. That's where we're at. Dump the incumbents. So one other thing I want to go ahead and find here, folks, and this is going to be interesting because give me a few moments to pull it up because this was not something I actually planned on doing today. One of the things that we're getting an awful lot of coming out of the Ukraine right now. Okay, Ukraine. It is Ukraine right now, not the Ukraine. It is Ukraine. Okay. This picture. Now, I'm not sure how many are familiar with an awful lot of what goes on with regards to combat zones, but this was actually taken in the Ukraine. This was taken by a Ukrainian photographer. This is the photographer's daughter. In this, she is 9 years old. Okay. Contemplate that. This is a 9-year-old girl in a combat zone that is currently gone viral. And has been used as a calling card for a significant number of countries to say, sacrifice more for her. You can pay more at the pump for her. You can pay more in the grocery store for her. Okay. This particular shot was posed, or it's still being used as a calling card. It's still being used as part of the propaganda associated with making us feel bad about the war. Now, this is war voyeurism. Okay? This is combat voyeurism. This is the fetishization of the combat zone. This is, and I'm not even sure how precisely to explain the level of wrong that is associated with using this image as a call to war. Because this is a reality. Okay? War orphans, child soldiers, these are not things we want to see here in America. And yet we are using this opportunity of combat voyeurism in order to justify actions that are only going to make the situation worse. Remember, folks, the best war is no war. And with that, you can go ahead and sign off, folks, because this one takes a lot out of me. Remember, folks, family, friends, community. As long as you got those three, you can make anything happen. KerberosNews.com. Go. KRTD Media at Patreon. And dump the incumbents. Pay attention to our other shows that are coming up. Stay informed. And think for yourself. I love that you guys listen to me. But at the end of the day, I need you to agree with me because you thought it through. Peace.